So more on the Electoral College. So the Electoral College has 538 electors. Remember, the number of electors in the country is equal to the number of congresspeople and senators, right? So a majority of the 270 so there's 538 electors and 538 votes, right? So a majority of 270 electoral votes is required to elect the president, right? You need 270 of that 538. Your state's entitled allotment of electors equals the number of members in its congressional delegation, right? 1 for each member in the House of Representatives plus 2 for the senators. All right? So criticisms of the Electoral College. Well, some say that it's undemocratic. If this whole project of creating this country is supposed to be rooted in democracy, right? Democratic representation, set up as a republic to have this direct participation of the American voter in, who goes on to represent us, then by having the Electoral College, is that undemocratic? Furthermore, why do we need that buffer between the president and the people, right? If the people are able to directly elect governors, congresspeople, assembly members, senators, then the question is, why not the president? Why not elect them directly? So a close election can also be decided by a few faithless electors. Remember, all parties have slates of electors. So in the state of California, you'd have, I believe it's 55 at this point. You'd have 55 electors in the state of California, but that means the Republican Party would have 55 electors, Democratic Party, the Green Party. So whoever actually wins the election, right, they'd be sending that number of electors to the Capitol to elect the president. So the Electoral College strategy can distort campaign strategies, right? So it really emphasizes swing states, which could make the majority of attention spent by presidential candidates to be attention spent in these swing states. It gives them a more, what's the word for it? I mean, more attention, more focus, right? There's an assumption that states that traditionally go Democratic will continue to do so, and the same for Republican states. So there's an assumption, and also to a certain extent maybe taking for granted that they are bound to win those states, okay? And maybe this approach of electing presidents through the Electoral College, maybe that made more sense at the founding of this, U.S. project. Maybe it made more sense then than now, because remember some of the original criticisms, right? They're concerns about tyrannical elites, right? They're concerns about the rule based off the experience of folks in England, right? So there's this sense of maybe that served as a kind of guardrails for that time, but again, is it as relevant? Does it continue to be as relevant now as it was then? General election campaign strategies. Well, in terms of presenting the candidate, they must convey clear understanding of the candidate's strengths. Okay. And they need to follow polls. Remember this conversation about political polls, public opinion polls, right, to see that citizens are responding positively. So polls remain important, as highlighted in last week's chapter and module, the role of polls and polling folks, and using those polls to provide more information to candidates, right? Of saying, oh, well, the American public doesn't seem to see this candidate as X, right? What can we do to highlight that, right? And we get the sense of that through these political polls. So polls can and do have a direct effect on campaign strategies. And again, going back to highlight those swing states that we discussed earlier on in this lecture, right? And you can think of the kind of unbalanced weight that the swing states have in elections, right? Such that you might have folks go time and time again to the swing states, but not visit states that they presume to be, or not spend as much time or energy in states they presume to be in their pocket. The existence of the Electoral College in and of itself creates a certain kind of political strategy to be able to win elections. Okay. And we can think of the role of the media in general election campaigns, right? We can think of newspaper ads, commercials, and so forth, right? And particularly things like negative advertising. So these are campaign advertising that emphasizes negative characteristics of opponents rather than their own strengths. And I've got a link here to a campaign ad, and so you can check that out and see what you think about that. This campaign ad is pretty old, but it is still discussed today as an example for negative advertising, and I'd be curious to know what you think about that. So candidates seek favorable airtime on the news, often appearing on soft news or entertainment programs. You can think of examples like when Bill Clinton was running in 92, right? He appeared on the Arsenio Hall. It was late night TV. He had, he played the saxophone and wore like dark sunglasses, and it's as much about sharing one's political ideas, but they're also seeking time on TV and shows to get their name out there, to increase likability of themselves, and so forth. And of course, the debates are important here, and the media plays a role in that. And a lot of people watch the debates between the presidential candidates, and it can have a huge effect on voters, like their perception of how they responded, engaged, treated other candidates, and so forth. So there's a lot going on here, but when we think about the role of voting and campaigns, the Electoral College here, it gives us additional insight to how this takes place within the United